Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hive's protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Thanks a lot, Global Patties, and thanks, Sherry. Hey, each week we get to talk about how much we appreciate our sponsor support, and we'd rather get right into talking about beekeeping, but our super great sponsors are critical to making all this happen. From the hosting fees to software to hardware, microphones, recorders, and transcripts, they enable each episode. So with that, thanks to Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsors this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinators. Learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor Kirsten Trainer and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2. Also, check out the new 2 Million Blossoms, the podcast, also available on her website or from wherever you download and stream your shows. Hey, everybody, thanks a lot for joining us. We're really, really happy you're here. Hey, Kim, welcome to October. I can't believe it's fall already.
Yes, fall, cool, finally. A long, hot summer. The nice thing is, I'm kind of surprised the cool weather didn't stop the goldenrod flow. In fact, I think the goldenrod flow is a little stronger now that it cooled off. I'm not sure. I'll know when I look later this week, but I can smell it more now than I could before.
Well, that's great. That's great. It's fall here too. It just started raining. So it'll probably rain now through to next March. So
you got a boat?
Yeah, no, it's used to raining here. It disappears pretty quickly, but it just stays wet. So there's nothing blooming right now. The bees are searching everything. They're even into the hummingbird feeders and everything else. I always feel bad for the bees at this point of the year. Hey, Kim, remember the Grow New York competition? We had one of its finalists on back in Season 2, Episode 7, I think it was Complex, the company that was set up a Varroa zapping laser system in their hives. Well, as you recall, Grow New York is a food innovation and agricultural technology business challenge focused on enhancing the emerging food market, emerging food, beverage, and agricultural markets, and it's an innovation cluster there in central New York, the Finger Lakes and central tier regions of the state, according to the website. This year, another one of our guests made the finalist cut. Remember episode 12 that we released at the beginning of August? We talked to Beemunity's CEO, James Wedd, about their microparticle detoxification to protect honeybees from pesticides.
Yes, I'm very interested in that product, and I think a lot of other beekeepers are going to be, and it doesn't surprise me that they've gotten some attention for this product. I'm looking forward to having it available.
It's pretty exciting. I'm happy to hear that they are receiving the recognition, as you point out, and hopefully they go on and win. They definitely could use the award money to further the research and make it into a usable product for beekeepers.
Yep. I wish them luck.
Honeybee Obscura is doing really good. You guys are working really hard getting those weekly episodes out. You've had some good fall episodes.
Yeah, we've got some, I guess you'd call them fall episodes. We've got one on fall feeding and one on winter wrapping. We've got one on invasive plants, and that kind of came to the fore here recently with with some of the things going on with the government and
Chinese tallow.
Thank you. Yes,
yeah.
Chinese tallow. And then we've got another one on what do you do when you run into a beekeeping friend who's kind of looked beekeeping in the face and was wondering if maybe he doesn't want to do it anymore. Is there something you can do to make that better or different or something? We call it waxing and waning because I think all of us go through that every once in a while. You just get to a spot and you're just tired and it hurts and you don't want to do it anymore. So what do you do?
And the Varroa don't help either.
Yeah, they never help.
No. So have you been reading anything interesting lately?
Yeah, there's another book. There's a new book out, Jeff, by Keith Delaplane. And I don't know if you remember back here about 20 years ago, Keith and Dan Meyer out in Washington put together a book on crop pollination by bees, evolution, ecology, conservation, and management. And Keith has now updated that for a second edition. And I've got a review here if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah. Let's listen to it.
All right. Dr. Delaplane has updated the insect pollination work he and Dan Meyer did just over 2 decades ago. This is, without doubt, a very comprehensive and detailed look at, essentially, the entire aspect of the relationship between bees and plants. Now, that's saying a lot because there's a lot there, but he does a good job of covering it, I think. This is for all of the bees and all of the plants that bees pollinate. And moreover, it brings into play the role that humans play in this seed and food-producing activity. There's 11 chapters in this textbook, because it is a textbook, for both scientists and the rest of us, I guess, with a large selection of photos and drawings of bees, flowers, equipment, and more to illustrate the content of each chapter. There are also many charts and graphs that detail what may appear to be very different aspects of these diverse individuals together. He's bringing together things that people don't normally think should be brought together or hadn't thought about being brought together, and it sheds some light on both sides of this equation. Evolution of both plants and bees is explained and described as the basic biology of bees, and that would be all the bees that are involved in the world of pollinating plants. 11 families of bees are examined, showing both physical and nesting behaviors and how they play a role in and what flowers they pollinate. Just over 70 species of crop plants have their flowering systems examined and what kind of pollination they need, along with their dependence on the pollinators that visit them. This gives good background when working with growers and understanding how a crop produces. And if you know anything about if you're a pollinator or are thinking of one, cardinal rule is know the crop better than the farmer, because it goes without saying, because you have to. When he asks you a question, you have to not only have the answer, but another question for him so that he knows you understand what's going on. So following this are our estimates of the value of pollinators for various crops on a global scale. And here's some numbers. There's a 20-page section on managing honeybees for pollination, including global numbers of managed colonies for the 20 most populous countries. Where do you think the U.S. falls on that scale of the 20 most populous countries for bees and pollinators and numbers of hives? What would you guess?
5th?
Well, you're actually not very far away. The U.S. is number 10 on this list. India is number 1 with just over 13 million colonies. The U.S. has almost 3 million, so you can see the difference in the size. Number 20 is Serbia with just under 1 million colonies, so you can see where it goes from just under 1 million to just over 13 million. The remainder of this chapter covers the beekeeping basics that commercial pollinators will find useful. That includes moving hives, timing, spacing, competing bloom, and other topics that you have to deal with. And this is where knowing more about the crop than the grower is, because you'll be able to ask about competing crops and weeds and whether things are going along. Then Keith put in a long, close look at managing bumblebees, including biology, queen breeding, raising colonies, and using for pollination. And this is followed by looking at managed solitary bees. Here, think of alfalfa leafcutters, or also the alkali bees or the orchard mason bees, too. Keith finishes with chapters on using wild bees and stingless bees in an operation and what would be needed for habitat and protection. If you're already a commercial pollinator, or you want to become one, or simply want to know much more about the art, science, and business of pollination with bees, this book should be on your shelf within easy reach. There's a lot of good information here.
Sounds like a great read. I look forward to getting a copy of that. Well, Kim, coming up, we have our conversation with Dara Scott from Hive Alive.
You know, I got to say one thing. He's dealing with seaweed. and feeding bees with seaweed. And the first thing I thought of was, didn't we just talk about bananas? Feeding bananas to seaweed and bananas. I'm eager to talk to him. I got to find out what this is about.
It's quite the salad for our honeybees. Let's get right into that, but first, a quick word from our friends at Strong Microbials.
Hello, beekeepers. Your honeybees face a lot of challenges out there. Unbalanced food sources from monoculture crops, holding yards, drought, food shortages, antibiotics, pesticides, and pathogens like chalkbrood. To overcome these challenges, your bees need the multiple bacteria that are in all nectars, pollens, and the environment. These bacteria aid honeybees' digestion and improve your honeybees' response and resilience to pesticides. Now you can help improve your honey colony health with a quick, easy, and safe-to-use product. Strong Microbials Super DFM Honeybee uses naturally occurring bacteria to restore the healthy gut biome of your honeybees. Check them out today at www.strongmicrobials.com.
Hey, and while you're at the Strong Microbial site, make sure you click on and subscribe to their Hive, their regular newsletter full of interesting information and product updates. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Sitting across the virtual Zoom table right now from us is Dara Scott. He is the CEO, Director of Advanced Science, the manufacturer of the product Hive Alive. Dara, welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast.
Thanks very much. A pleasure to be here.
It's nice to meet you finally, Dara.
And to you.
It's evening there in Ireland. Where in Ireland are you?
Galway. It's the west coast of Ireland, sort of middle west, the wettest place in Ireland you could live, but the nicest place in Ireland you could live.
The wettest place. We'll have to compare notes sometime with Seattle.
I've been to Seattle. Seattle's a million times drier than I used to work on research boats in and out of Seattle, and it was always dry. I'd go back home to the rain.
Yeah, well, you must have been here during the summertime.
To be fair, I was.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's good. Well, good. So we welcome you to the show. We invited you to the show before you became you sponsored a couple podcasts, so we appreciate your sponsorship. But you have a unique product, and the fall is a great time of year to start considering supplementing colonies and getting them strong through the winter here in the States. And we wanted to get you on the show to talk about your product, Hive Alive.
Great. I'm delighted any opportunity to talk about it.
You know, Dara, in looking at what, well, let me back up. Let's start with you. What's your background in bees and beekeeping?
I'm beekeeping over 20 years now. I went to New Zealand. I was living in New Zealand for nearly a year, and I saw it everywhere there. It's quite popular in New Zealand, and this is sort of even before the Manuka rush was going on. But you could see hives everywhere. You don't see them at home in Ireland anywhere really. They're kind of all hidden behind ditches and walls and stuff. I think people are afraid they're going to get vandalized or something. Whereas in New Zealand, you could see them. So I said, that's pretty cool. I want to check that out when I come back. So I came back to Ireland and joined a beekeeping club, and I decided to keep bees. Worked with a beekeeper for a summer. You found a small cluster of bees on a bridge, and it was a cast swarm actually, and that was it. Started off with that and kept going from there.
Not unlike a whole lot of other people who keep bees now. So it's nice to know that you got off on the right foot. Well, where did that take? How did that take you to working on the product that you've got? What were you looking at trying to solve when you started looking at this?
Yeah, so I was working with marine research at the time, and that involved, like I mentioned a second ago, going to sea and going to sea for long periods of time, at a month at a time. And I was getting tired of it, and I was looking for something that I was passionate about, which was beekeeping. And so I started thinking about, what can I do for beekeeping? What most people do, make honey or breed bees or whatever. But in the west of Ireland, the weather is so fickle that you just couldn't do it. It's not sustainable. So I was looking at other options, and then I was looking at what was going on at the time. Nosema cerenae had become reasonably newly discovered, although it was around for a lot longer than people realized. And I was looking at that and looking at what could be done about that. So I spent basically about 3 or 4 years researching into the disease, what could be done about the disease, and started developing it from there, working in particular with the university here in Galway, the National University of Ireland, Galway.
Another beekeeper finding a problem and solutioning, coming up with a solution on their own.
Yep.
That's really good.
So, well, tell us what the solution is. What was the product that you ended up developing?
So, Hive Alive, it's a feed supplement for honeybees. We spent a long time developing it. It's the key ingredient in it is seaweed extracts. We have a special process, patented process for extracting the actives in seaweeds. When I started doing this, seaweeds were just starting to get popular in animal feeds. Now they're quite popular in animal feeds, especially in animal production around the world. At the time, Ireland and Canada are the two top places in the world on seaweed for feed, seaweed extraction, the technology behind seaweeds. I partnered up with some people who are really top world-class people on seaweeds and said, look, this is what's going on with the bees. This in particular focusing on Nosema and general bee health, but Nosema was the key focus, and said, look, what can we do? So we tried a bunch of combinations. We did work in Italy, we did work in the Czech Republic, and eventually settled on a formula that included sort of the thymol and the lemongrass as well. Yeah, so that's how we started developing it. This is
Nosema cerenae you were looking at, right?
Yeah, because Apis was around a long time, and Fumagillin at the time was it's not allowed in Europe anymore, but Fumagillin was the time well able to handle Apis, and it wasn't really a big problem. Whereas cerenae is it's funny in the States it's not seen as a big problem. In Europe it's seen as a big problem. I don't know how that happened. In the US it's sort of like, well, they don't die from it, so it's okay. But I'm still a very firm believer that if there's a couple of million spores in your gut and they're piercing the epithelial cells of your gut and just bursting them open, destroying them, that's not a good thing. So and that's really, the whole idea was to get cerenae under control, which is what our product helps, but also helps. Seaweed extracts are also antibacterial, they're also immune stimulatory, and general overall bee health is what we're looking at. So that's what helps the bees have pathogen levels that are lower in the colony, that's maintaining their colony health. So as a result of that, they end up being more productive, being healthier, surviving the winter better, and making more honey and more bees.
Well, with Nosema cerenae here, you're right. It seldom kills colonies. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but what it does is it challenges the bee's immune system, and that weakened immune system allows other things to come in and challenge the bee even further, viruses being a big part of it. So what you're doing, what Hive Alive does then is it reduces the influence of Nosema cerenae on the bee, which allows the bee to better handle these other problems they have?
Yeah, it's to be honest, we developed around that. It actually does more stuff. We have data now to show it's actually was beekeepers told us about chalkbrood, that it stops chalkbrood in the colony. But also we know we've done in vitro tests to show it will stop the spores of foul brood going on as well. So it's got other advantages for sure. But yeah, the whole idea is like you're dead right. Cerenae, if bees are doing fine, there's loads of food. Cerenae won't affect them that much because they can repair themselves and they can heal themselves. And they can do fine. But there's loads of data to show that if they're under stress, if there isn't enough food, pesticides, viruses, all these things, if your gut wall is compromised, it's not good. And all these published data show that if you have cerenae, these things will affect you more. But even with Apis, when Apis was around, the bees, okay, sometimes they died out, but bees were less productive when they had Apis. They were sick, whereas cerenae is more aggressive and around for a longer period of time in the season. So it's always affecting them, not just over winter like Apis used to be. So during the whole summer time when your bees are out working hard, they're also having compromised their gut. Their health has been compromised.
It's kind of flying around with a upset stomach the entire time, or just some sort of intestinal. You're just not getting the nutrients from the food that you should. So you can't
absorb it properly. Yeah. So to replicate this Nosema cerenae, basically puts all its DNA into the epithelial cell of the gut. It then uses the energy from the epithelial cell to replicate and then burst that cell open.
Better Bee is pleased to sponsor today's episode of Beekeeping Today podcast. For over 40 years, Better Bee has supplied beekeepers across the country with the tools, equipment, and knowledge needed to succeed. Because many Better Bee employees are beekeepers themselves, they understand your needs and challenges and are better prepared to answer your beekeeping questions. From their colorful catalog to their support of beekeeper educational activities, including this podcast, Better Bee truly lives up to their tagline of beekeepers serving beekeepers. See for yourself at betterbee.com.
I've got your product now, and it is beefing up my bees, if you will, making them healthier and more productive. Am I feeding this all year long? Spring, fall? What's the regimen for feeding this product?
Okay, so the best time to feed is the autumn time, the fall. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is you fed them, they're stored it, so they'll be eating it for a longer period of time, so it's protecting their gut. And the second reason is that we know that the product will also break down spores. So if it's being stored in the comb, you're also sort of breaking down the spores in the comb. So you're sort of essentially sterilizing your comb as well at the same time. So that's the best time to do it. So it has the best long-term effect. But also we've seen data that shows spring is also very good. Feeding it randomly during the summertime, I think it's not going to really make a big difference. What we do say, though, as well, is in the springtime, you can also do, which is quite good, is a drench, where you can use a higher concentration. It's on the bottle. You can use a higher concentration, drench them once a week for 3 weeks, and that makes a big difference to their productivity as well.
And you're doing that in the fall, the drench?
The drench is generally in the spring, when there's very few, when there's very little brood, the least amount of brood possible.
Early spring.
Okay. And can I do this when I've got honey supers on?
You can. All the ingredients are safe. They're food safe. You can eat them, but it is going to probably taint the honey and give it a different smell. So I wouldn't recommend it. Okay. We say on the bottle, stop feeding 2 weeks before you put supers on.
Okay.
In the same way, you just don't want to get sugar syrup in your supers. You don't get sugar syrup with Hive Alive in your supers.
All right. And how much am I feeding? I'm feeding in the fall. How much am I feeding?
So that really depends. The trials that we've done, generally they're a gallon, 40 liters a gallon in the autumn and a gallon in the spring. I'm biased, but I wouldn't feed syrup without it. The more you feed, the more benefits you will get. And it's like if you only feed for a gallon of syrup, then that's perfect. But if you're feeding 10 gallons and only 1 gallon has the Hive Alive, it's not going to be as effective as if you did the whole amount of feed with the Hive Alive.
Okay. What about if I'm making splits and I've got a good colony, but I'm going to make 2 smaller colonies out of it. Would this help those 2 colonies?
Yeah, it'll help. It'll help any colony. By the way, I should just add for that last point. You're better off feeding if you're only going to feed 4 gallons. So you feed 10. You only have enough for 4 gallons. Make up that 4 gallons. Don't dilute it into 10 gallons because it won't be as efficacious. If you start diluting it, the concentration won't be strong enough. So that's an important point. I should have said at the outset. It works all the time. It's just, I suppose, the best benefits are when you're doing it in the autumn, they feed it for the longest period of time. So they're eating it for the longest period of time. But like syrup isn't ideal. Syrup. I know everyone. But most beekeepers feed syrup, but it's not the ideal food to be feeding bees. For no other reason, it ferments quite quickly. And that's one thing that Hive Alive stops the syrup from doing. So if you make up syrup, for instance, in the autumn, and you've some left over, you can keep it in the springtime and it's not going to go off because Hive Alive is in it. Also, it's not going to, start fermenting in the combs if a cold snap comes in and they haven't dried it all out and capped it off. But the same thing when you're feeding, splits or whatever, it's better. It has nutrients in there as well. It has different minerals, different vitamins, stuff like that as well. But that's not the key focus of what Hive Alive is about. But it does have those things. It's also being shown to be prebiotic as well. We're doing some work on some probiotics, totally separate project. But we've discovered that feeding Hive Alive 2 weeks between probiotics and Hive Alive, 2 weeks apart, that there's a synergistic effect. They actually work better than if they were on their own. and that's because there's polysaccharides in the seaweeds that the good bacteria like to live off. But again, that's another kind of side benefit of the Hive Alive, not the key focus of what it's about.
No, that's really interesting. And you're talking about feeding it with sugar syrup. Is that the only way you can provide and give the Hive Alive product?
No. You can add it to protein patties, and you can add it to fondant. Both of them are easily added. The only main thing to watch out for there is not to have, same with the syrup, not to have the syrup too hot. You don't want the syrup to be hot; it'll break. So the seaweed extracts are cold extracted, specifically the purpose that heat damages them. So if your syrup is hot, or your fondant is hot, or anything you're making up with that is hot, it's going to damage that stuff. And actually, we've just released in the US, they're getting shipped out as of, I think it's today or tomorrow, to customers, fondant. So we've made our own fondant with added vitamins and amino acids, specifically for bees. We launched it in Europe last year. We sold out pretty much immediately, so you didn't get a chance to send it over to the States in time. But we're just launching it now. They're pre-packed. They're 1 kilo. It's at 2.2 pounds, and these flat pre-sealed bags. It doesn't go off. It doesn't dry out. You just open a little corner on the bottom of the bag, put it over your crown board, over the hole in your crown board. The bees can go up and feed that, which is wicked handy, because there is nothing more depressing than opening up your colonies after the winter time and finding bees that all their bees, their bum sticking out of the comb because they've died of starvation and they're trying to get the last bits out of the comb. Yeah. And worse again is, like, they had food, but the food was too far away because it was cold. They couldn't get to it. So the fondant deals with that. So they have food, and they have food. If they don't have food, they'll be taking the fondant down. You can see that because the bag is clear. But on top of that, the food is directly over the cluster. So it means that the bees always have access to food very close to them as well. So it gets them through the winter. And then, even more importantly, again, is early spring, when they start running out of food, and all the frames out to the edges are the only food at the very ends of the colony. You put that bag on, they got access to food. So if it gets cold, or they start running out of food, and it gets cold, they start clustering again. They have access to food straight away in that fondant. So yeah, we just launched it, and it's gone. It's a bomb. We're nearly sold out of the stuff already. But very popular.
So I want to go back to the product origination. Why seaweed? What made you think of seaweed, and what about seaweed works for the honeybees?
To be honest, I was dead lucky about seaweed. It was a friend of mine I knew who knew this guy who I ended up working with in the end doing this, and he said, why don't you think about, because he knew he was doing stuff with animal feeds, why don't you talk to this guy? And as soon as I talked to him, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And the main reason is that seaweeds, first of all, are very bioactive. There's lots and lots of stuff going on them, but also land-based pathogens haven't evolved to defend against seaweeds. It's totally different for them. It's something totally new. So we're coming at it from kind of left field, if you imagine, and it's quite unique that way. So yeah, and it's seaweeds themselves, the antifungal, the antibacterial, that stuff that they naturally have in them in large amounts. That just makes it perfect for this application. I mean, it's used in other, like, it's used, dairy industry, used in chicken industry. It's used even actually feeding fish. Believe it or not, fish don't normally eat seaweed, but fish and prawns, and horses in particular. Actually, it's used because they just do better with it. So horses, it's more like show jumpers and stuff like that, so they perform better. But for like cattle and stuff like that, is that they put on weight, they get sick less, that sort of thing.
I did feed a seaweed based product for when I had horses, and they did make a difference. And it's interesting with seaweed also, and I can't remember, and maybe one of our listeners can correct me on this, but I do believe that that they found that feeding a certain type of seaweed, adding it to the dairy cattle mixture, reduces the amount of methane. Is that is that correct?
They're environmentally friendly, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I dreamt that.
No, I think it was New Zealand research that did that. Yeah. And they're still working on that. I think that's going to be going mainstream fairly soon.
Really interesting. I was looking at your website. There's 3 different seaweeds, or is it just seaweeds and algae? I'm not sure the difference.
There's a range of different seaweeds in there, and a range of different seaweed extracts, and it's proprietary. I'd love to tell you, but I can't.
You'd have to shoot.
But yeah, it's our own blend.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, I respect that.
Hive Alive is a liquid feed supplement for honeybees, and right now is the best time to feed it to your colonies. Hive Alive contains a blend of seaweed extracts, thyme, and lemongrass, a unique formula which improves bee gut health, resulting in more bees, honey, and improved overwinter survival. Now, Hive Alive has just launched their new fondant patty, which contains the correct dose of Hive Alive, vitamins, and amino acids, and comes in easy-to-use pouches which are great for giving to colonies over winter. Ask about Hive Alive at your local beekeeping store or visit the website www.usa.hivealivebees.com for more information.
So the seaweeds produce these products to protect themselves and their environment. And what you're doing is you're taking this protective material out of the sea and putting it on land, which is, I can see why land animals would have like zero resistance to it. I can believe that would work quite well. And you're using more than one kind of seaweed, so you've got a double whammy coming in there. Do you have an infinite amount of seaweed available?
We have plenty available for where we're at. Yeah, for the beekeeping space. It's not a problem, and it's sustainably harvested as well in Ireland, so we're good for that. Also, seaweeds. Since we've done this, and I've seen it since, but when I developed it first, but people have written into me since about it, is they've seen bees working on seaweed. Now, I don't think it's just the salts, but they like chewing on the seaweed, which I never, when I was developing, I didn't know that at the time, but I have since seen it.
In one of our episodes, and I can't remember the exact number, but feeding bananas to bees. So and you can actually cut up bananas and put them on the top bars and put the super on top, and it's really good for bees. Now I can see people going out to the local tide pool and grabbing a handfuls of seaweed and plopping them on. Well, don't do that. It's really interesting. It's amazing, and it's like you said, it's renewable.
Yeah, yes, it's harvested sustainably, so that's important. It's important to us. Like, actually, to be honest, we're really trying to go down that route now. Our first batch of 500 ml bottles have been made with post-recycled plastic bottles, so bottles that have been plastic taken out of the environment and made into new bottles. The 100 mils are as well. We're working on the 2 liter and the 10 liter. We're just trying to make ourselves, like the office is wind powered. We only have a recycling bin. We don't have we call a black bin here in Ireland, like, the non-recycling bin. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to be as conscious of that stuff as possible.
That's very cool.
By the way, bananas, I like bananas put out an alarm pheromone. The smell of bananas mimics the alarm pheromone.
You would think that, yeah, but I've tried it since we've talked to the person who did the research, and they eat the inside and the skin, and it's all gone.
Yeah,
wow.
And they said that the banana smells only like the alert. It's not the sting pheromone, and so that it just kind of wakes the bees up. Of course, you don't want to take a bath in banana juice.
I'm interested in you mentioned that when you have Hive Alive in the hive, or you fed your bees Hive Alive, that it inhibits the fungal growth of or the growth of American foul brood, and if you have American foul brood in your hive and you feed this, it will. Does it help cure the bees? And what about the spores that have been produced? Yeah,
so I'd say straight out of the outset, it's not a treatment for foul brood. I think if you have foul brood, you need to manage that, and that's like in Ireland, it's quite serious. I know in the States, it's like in Ireland, you burn the hive. That's what you do. But I don't know what happens in the States. But again, the idea of this is to keep the pathogens level low. So we know that it will stop the spores from replicating and germinating and that stuff. We think it's breaking down the spore walls like it is for the Nosema spores. So, like, the spores are always around, and it's really about there being the right amount of spores, the right amount of time with the colony weak enough for foul brood to develop and become a problem. So the whole idea again is you're storing this over the winter time. It's in the cells. It's sterilizing any spores that might be in the cells, and as a result of that, you've got less pathogens. So there's less foul brood around, there's less nosema around, there's less chalkbrood around. Now the chalkbrood, I mean, it's the beekeepers that told us that if you use Hive Alive, you pretty much don't get chalkbrood, but foul brood's a tougher beast altogether. So it keeps the levels low. That's the best way of looking at it, as opposed to if I have it, I can use Hive Alive. Now, we haven't tried it, but I don't think it would work. I don't think it's going to manage it. You'd have to maybe up the concentration. No, I'm not even going to start talking about that.
Well, it goes with every with the belief or the theory that if you have a healthy bee, then it's going to be able to ward off all pathogens better than a weakened bee.
110%. Prevention is better than cure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like someone described before as an insurance policy. Like, it's, if your bees are healthy or doing well, there's way less chance something comes around that they're going to be knocked back completely by it. But if your bees are getting by and there's a whole pathogen levels building up and there's all stuff going on, something else comes in, there's a drought, there's whatever, and the bees are going to be hit much harder than if they were healthy.
Right.
That's exactly right. I've got I've written a couple of books over the years, and one's coming out this fall called Common Sense Natural Beekeeping, and I really wish I would have known about your product, because this is certainly something that people who are looking at whatever you want to consider natural beekeeping to be would be interested in. So I can see that this will do well with that group of people.
Cool.
When we do a review of your book on the podcast, Kim, we can use Hive Alive as an addendum.
Okay.
There you go.
We'll do that.
Perfect.
All right. Well, what have we not talked about that we need to know about Hive Alive?
Give me a sec. So yeah, I mean, I suppose the big thing about Hive Alive versus most other products out there, if not all, is we have lots of data to back it up. We have published data that's, the big trial is peer reviewed in the Journal of Apiculture Research, and I suppose so we have lots of data to show that all this works. And the other part is that it's people kind of look for quick fixes, right? And it's not a quick fix. It does help a little bit in the short term, but it's not this quick fix. Bang! I put it in. My bees are amazing. Problem's all gone. Don't worry about it again. The idea about this product is that you use it, and over time the bees do better and better. Like in the main big trial that we did the trial over a year and a half. Now you could see a difference after a year for sure, but after a year and a half, now they started off with nooks and stuff like that, but the colony population really increased. Like, it's embarrassing how much it increased. It's nearly doubled. Like, and nobody believes us, but that's the truth. That's what happened. Then we did another trial over a year in France, and that I can't remember, was it like a 20 or 30% increase with that trial. Not as much, wasn't a longer period of time, but I'd say best case scenario is you're doubling your colony population over a year and a half. But I think in general you're going to be getting 20, 30, to get 20 plus population increase and 20%, honey increase for a very small outlay of money. The ball is quite small. The ball is very small, much smaller than say competing products, and you only need a small amount in it. It's quite concentrated, but the bang for buck of what you're putting in there and what you're getting out in return is really, like in animal feed. Like if you're in the dairy industry and you could say, oh, I can give you 20% more productivity, they'd be like, what? That's amazing, But yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's just different in bees, I suppose. But yeah, small amount goes a long way, but needs to be used consistently.
Well, it's definitely very interesting, and the approach is. I find your approach, taking something out of the sea and feeding it to bees, isn't the first thing I would have ever thought of, but it seems to be working quite well. So congratulations, I guess I should say, if nothing else, just being able to put 2 and 2 together and get 5, and making it work.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's become quite successful. We're in, I think we're like 45, 46 countries at this point in time. Yeah, and still growing. So it's great.
You must be doing something right.
And you just opened up a distributorship in the United States, correct? That's new.
Yeah. So we've got a warehouse now in the US, so we can sell directly to customers and get quicker out to retailers as well. It just makes it so much quicker and so much easier. Now, I suppose it's been very lucky too. I suppose obviously a lot of people know that with COVID and all that, there's the shipping delays have been on all over the place, and it's been difficult, but we've been able to manage that and keep on top of that this year, which is great. So yeah, we can get product very quickly to people if they need it, which is nice.
So if I'm a small scale bee supply dealer, someplace, could I get it from you to resell to my customers?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. The email info at HiveAliveBees.com, info@HiveAliveBees.com.
Okay.
And we'll talk to anybody. Yeah, we're delighted to have, because it's nice to have as many places as possible. Yep. That's important. We don't want to just be dealing with one or two big dealers.
I think we're good. Dara, I really appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us on Beekeeping Today podcast. Thank you for supporting us and the show. I think it's a wonderful product, and it fits in really well with all types of beekeeping programs. So thanks. It's great.
Thanks very much for the opportunity. And it's
nice having you here, Dara. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It's great to talk with you guys finally. And thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Well, you ready to go start laying leaves of seaweed across your hive tops, Kim?
Hey, this stuff, you look at the data on their webpage and you look at the research that they've done and the claims that they're making, and it's all pretty solid. And interestingly enough, it makes sense in that you've got seaweed producing antitoxins and things to protect itself that us land-based organisms have not ever experienced. And I can see why the logic of why it works so well. And then they add these other things. The lemongrass and the menthol well, he's got data. It's in how many countries? People must be liking it.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I like the fact that it works also with other supportive supplements we can give. We know that the bees are stressed now for a number of reasons, a lot due to the global climate warming and changes that are going on. So anything we can do to help support our bees, beyond trying to plant more and do all of that, I think this is helpful.
Yep. It's well, like I said, I've got some. I'm going to try it this week, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and just for our listeners, we were talking to Dara before and after our interview with him for the show. And, he's quite the experimental beekeeper himself. He does a lot of different types of beekeeping, and we're going to have him back just to talk about what he's been doing with his bees there in Western Ireland.
Well, that and the issues that they're having in a lot of places is bringing in bees from other places. They've developed their own strains that do well in Ireland. The native mellifera, I'll say it fast, the native mellifera, and they get it developed, and then people bring in, bees from other places, and they mix, of course, like they're going to do, and then suddenly you've lost that strain that you worked so long to get, that did so well in that location. So I can see his concern, and he's going to talk about that also.
Well, that'll be a good show. That'll be early next spring, so look forward to that episode. All right, well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let other beekeepers looking for a new podcast know what you like. You can get there directly from our website by clicking on reviews along the top of any web page. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support of Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. We want to thank Strong Microbials for their support of the podcast. Check out their full probiotic line at www.strongmicrobials.com. We want to thank Better Bee for joining us as a supporter. Check out all of the great beekeeping supplies at www.betterbee.com. We want to thank Hive Alive for their support of the Beekeeping Today podcast for the last 6 episodes. And finally, and most importantly, and truly most importantly, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else you'd like to mention, Kim?
I think you covered it all, Jeff. It's time to go to supper.
Okay. Well, enjoy. Goodbye, everybody.